Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Anna Lee, a radiation oncologist at MD Anderson Cancer Center and a member of the new practitioner committee of ACRO, and also a guest co-host of today's ACRO podcast.
Hey, good morning. I am Dr. Serguei Castaneda, a radiation oncologist at Miami Cancer Institute, Baptist Health, South Florida, also a member of the new practitioner committee of ACRO and co-host of today's podcast.
In today's episode, we have two very special guests who take care of patients every day, but also have a special passion for personal finance, for which we as physicians have little to no formal education or training. Joining us for discussion about how we can optimize our personal finance as early career radiation oncologists are Dr. Disha Spath, who is an internal medicine physician at Dartmouth, founder CEO of the Frugal Physician website, and whose voice you hear frequently on the White Coat Investor with Dr. Jim Dolly. And we have Dr. Seungtaek Choi, who is section chief and professor of GE Radiation Oncology at MD Anderson, who happens to also be a personal finance guru.
We have all agreed to by our first names. Disha and Seungtaek, it's great to have you on today's podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you for having me too.
Let's get started as we have a lot of ground to cover. Disha, can you go through some of the most common retirement plans that one might have or might see in private practice based on the type of contract you might have? And when would you recommend someone start planning for retirement?
All right, that's a great question. Let me go backwards a little bit and just start with why do we need to save for retirement at all? As you know, inflation is about 9 to 10% right now. So if you have just cash and you're saving, say, $22,500, which happens to be the limit of a retirement, a 401k or 403b retirement account, if you're just saving that every year and putting it in cash underneath your mattress, you would, at the end of 35 years of practicing, you would have about $750,000 or $780,000. And a regular physician living a typical physician life generally needs about $3 to $5 million to retire. So as you can tell, that's not going to be enough money. Not only is it not going to be enough money, you're also going to see decreased spending power of those dollars. So you're going to have to be fighting inflation. Inflation is generally 3 to 4%, generally, but not now. So as you can see, you really need to start saving for retirement now. And the really cool and important thing that we need to know is that when we invest in securities like stocks and bonds, that the gains that you get from the stocks and bonds compound into the money that you're already producing. So you're giving your money into to companies that are out there creating value. They're going to make your money grow. They're going to put your money to work, and you're going to have more money at the end of it. And not only are you going to have the sum of all the money that you receive back and the money that you put in, you're going to have compounding growth. So what is compounding growth? Compounding growth is exponential growth. Do you want your money to grow at an exponential rate? Of course we do, right? We all know what an exponential curve looks like now, thanks to the COVID pandemic. As you initially, the numbers start pretty low, and initially a lot of us just sort of like watched it like, creeping up. Okay, it's not terrible. But as one person gave it to 5 other people, and those 5 other people gave it to 10 other people each, right? The growth compounded. You had that exponential takeoff, and that's exactly what happens to your money after a while. So when is a good time to start planning for retirement? It is right now, because you have to get yourself on that exponential growth curve. A lot of your retirement account growth is just going to depend on how long your money has been sitting there and compounding. The longer it sits there and compounds, the quicker it takes off, or rather, there's about 10 to 20 years that it takes for it to hit that exponential growth curve. So you have to get in there now. And the reason that we want to try to put our money in a retirement account instead of just a brokerage account where we're buying stocks and bonds outside of a retirement account is this: taxes. Taxes are the biggest expense in a physician's life. We generally pay, if a physician's making, $250,000, they're paying $60,000 to $70,000 in tax a year. Okay, so that's a terrible number, but it's good. It's good. subsidizes our lifestyle, our society, and it's wonderful. However, the government has given us ways to reduce our tax burden by incentivizing certain behavior. They want us to put money in retirement accounts, and for that reason, they give us tax breaks to do so. They want us to save for our retirement because they don't want us to be dependent on the government when we retire. So how do they do that? Well, if we start off by thinking about how taxation occurs in a brokerage account, it's somewhat easier to understand. So in a brokerage account outside of this tax incentivized space, you're paying money on the tax, you're paying tax on the money that you earn in the first place. Then you put the money into the brokerage account. Then it has growth, dividends, the companies, the stocks give you dividends, you get interest from the bonds. All that money is taxed. And then when you take the money out, it's also taxed again. So you have three times of the taxation. However, if you put it in a retirement account, you can either choose to pay tax now or choose to pay tax later. But the growth isn't taxed until you take that money out in the end. Until you take it out for retirement. And that's a pre-tax contribution. So there's two ways to contribute to a retirement account. And I'm getting ahead of myself. Your question was, what are the types of retirement accounts? Let me go there first. The types of retirement accounts largely depend on what your work situation is. So if you're an employee, you have access to several different accounts. A 401k if you're working for a for-profit employer, a 403b if you're working for a non-for-profit employer. Some people also have access to 457s, which is another $22,500 of tax protected space. However, the 457s is deferred compensation. So you're telling your employer, don't give me my pay yet. I want you to just keep it and invest it for me. And you can get that money back in the future. You can get that payment in the future, but you're depending on the employer's solvency. You're depending on the fact that the employer is still going to be around when you want to retire. So that's a 457. Now, if you are a business owner, you have access to a whole other set of retirement accounts. You have access to solo 401ks, for example, and you have access to a whole host of retirement accounts that I'm not going to list now because it's going to turn into a alphabet soup. So that's another $50,000, $70,000, $60,000, $7,000 that you can put there. Then you go into the retirement accounts that you can have just because you have earned income. An IRA, an individual retirement account, is another tax protected space that you can put your money into. And you can do this on top of your 401k, 403b, 457, solo 401k. So you can do this no matter what you're doing, as long as you have earned income. And then the fourth type of retirement account is actually kind of disguised as a health savings account. An HSA is a space where you can put in money, but you have to have a high deductible plan, and you have to use that money for healthcare expenses initially. And then after you reach a certain age, you can actually use it. It turns into an IRA, like a retirement account. So moral of the story, all of these, number and alphabetical soup, all of these spaces are just spaces where the government's giving you a tax break to save for your retirement. And should you use it? 100%. Why would you not use it, right? The only downside is that you don't really have access to the money now because you're earmarking this money for the future, for your retirement. You're going to get a tax break, and you're going to have a nice cushion to go to when you do go to retire.
Wow, thanks, Disha. That was very, very detailed, and I feel like there's so much to cover. You did mention like a brokerage account. Can you explain what is a brokerage account for those who may not know?
Absolutely. So a brokerage account is basically an account that you can open up at any brokerage like Vanguard, Fidelity, Schwab. You just go there, you tell them, I want to buy stocks and bonds or whatever else, real estate, REITs. I want to invest money. And so they give you an account, much like a checking account or a credit account. You just open it up in your name, and then you start buying securities there. But it is a completely unprotected tax base. If you get sued, people can go off after that money. If you, and then the IRS also knows about it. And so you're going to be paying taxes along the way on that money.
Okay, great. Wow. So Seungtaek, Disha mentioned, these various these various retirement plans and how you can have certain limits. And I think when I was starting out in my academic position, it was, I saw the various options that were offered to me. And then it was kind of overwhelming to see figure out the various limits associated with each plan. What are the different plans in academic practice, and what are some of your thoughts about retirement plans?
Yeah, so I think that I agree with you. It's very confusing sometimes because there's so many accounts. For us at MD Anderson, we actually have 4 retirement accounts that we can have access to. Thankfully, I think most institutions will have an office that can help you with financial planning for retirement. In fact, I got an email from them 2 days ago saying exactly what my annual contribution limits were. So that does let me plan out for the year in terms of the monthly contributions to my retirement. I suspect most institutions have that too. So definitely check with that office to see if you can get the annual contributions. If you don't have that, the IRS has, information on their website. So I think that's where I would go to look for the limits that you have for your accounts. I totally agree with Disha that in terms of retirement, you should start as soon as possible. In fact, one of my favorite sayings is that the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The next best time is now. So I feel the same way about retirement. In fact, I usually tell the residents who work with me that if they can do it, although it's very difficult because of student loans, is to try to have a Roth IRA during their residency. I think that with being tax-free in terms of growth and having so many years for compounding interest or the dividends, I think that really be really helpful for them in the future. So I think that once again, starting retirement early, I think is definitely key in terms of having a good retirement later down the road. In terms of the actual limits and sort of how to sort of use them, I tell residents and new attendings to really put maximal amount of money into their accounts, because it is really all, either going to be tax deferred, which means that you will not pay tax on that money. So that'll definitely save you money on taxes. And I totally agree that, if you can do a brokerage account as well, I mean, this is after tax. And as Disha mentioned, that it will be taxed later. But I still think that it's good to have that account to be able to once again get compound interest, because once the compounding starts, I mean, it's pretty amazing actually. In fact, I think Einstein called it the 8th wonder of the world. So I think once again, compound interest is pretty key.
Totally agree with that. I would also mention on the frugalphysician.com, I have a retirement account cheat sheet where I spent a whole day putting together going through the IRS website and putting together everything into one sheet that I could just visually see all the accounts that are available. This is how I used to study for medical school. So I've translated it over here. So if you want to check that out, it's kind of a representation. It does have a lot of information there. I made it a couple of years ago, so the numbers might be a little out of date as far as the contribution limits, but take a look there.
Switching gears, for many trainees and those in practice, we're looking to start a family soon or sometime in the future. Disha, for those who might not know, can you let us know about 529s, UTMAs, and the likes, and why those might be important?
Absolutely. So my kids have 3 accounts. They have 529s, UTMAs, and a Roth IRA. And that's because we're super gung-ho about investing. But you certainly do not have to have all of them, but you need to know that you have access to them. So 529s is the way that we traditionally save for college expenses. So 529s are generally sponsored by a state. And again, this is tax protected space that you're not going to get taxed on the growth in these accounts ongoing until you take that money out. And if you take that money out for education, you're not going to get taxed on it. So that's lovely. The money is put in post-tax, and there are no federal incentives to reduce your tax burden when you put that money in. However, some states do give you incentives to put money in. So for example, New York State gives you $10,000 of tax break if you put money into the 529s. So 529 is where you put money, and then again, buy securities. So buy stocks and bonds, index funds, ETFs, and let your money grow. Let the money grow for your kids. 529s can be started in your child's name. And then if your child doesn't need it, you can change the beneficiary to someone else. So you're in charge of a 529. You can even use that 529 money if you don't end up using it for your kids and no one else really needs it. You can use it to, do continuing education yourself. So 529s are made for saving for education. Another common account that's used is a UTMA. A UTMA is a Uniformed Trust for Minors Act, is what it stands for. And basically what it is that you are investing for your kids, or rather your kids are investing for themselves in a brokerage account. So a brokerage account is just a regular investment account that's not tax protected. UTMAs have, a limited amount of space. You can put as much money as you want in there and again, buy stocks and bonds. However, that money is going to belong to your child. So when they turn 18 or 21, they're going to get full access to that money and they don't have to use it for educational expenses. So, they could blow it on hookers and drugs and you have no control over that. So my family uses UTMAs to basically incentivize investing for our kids and have them learn how to invest. And so anytime they get $100 for their birthday or, money from grandma, they have the option to put some of that money into the UTMA and watch it grow. And, thankfully they have taken it up most of the time. They take about 50% and put it in the UTMA most of the time. So and then the last tax protected space that I'd like to cover today is a Roth IRA. So like I said, if anyone has earned income, they can contribute to an IRA. An IRA is a tax protected space for anyone with earned income. And so right now the contribution limit is still $6,000. And you can do it in a traditional way, which is you're not paying taxes now, or you can do it in a Roth way, which means you're paying taxes now and you will never pay taxes on that money again, as long as the tax code stays the same, of course, asterisks. But the Roth IRA is a really great way to save for kids if they have earned income. So whether it's earning money from a lemonade stand, babysitting, you just need to document it. And then as long as it's documented well and you are filling out all the paperwork for child labor in your state, in New York State, it's quite a lot. But as long as you have all the approvals that you need, you can also contribute there. Again, it grows in a tax advantageous fashion.
Yeah, I was going to say, how is your child earning income? But that's a great way, to really grow their money. Anything you want to add to that, Seungtaek?
Oh, yeah, not much more. I think I just had a baby, so I think we opened a 529. I guess the one thing is that there actually is I think a contribution limit at some point, I think, but it's pretty high numbers.
It's very
I think that in the end, I think you should try to put as much money you can into that you can. But I think you also have to sort of balance both, I guess, the saving for the child's education as well as your retirement. I think in the end, you can theoretically get loans for the education, but not for retirement. So I think that once again, you have to balance those two. The other thing I also sort of mentioned is that the Roth IRA can be used by physicians too. Our income limit is usually often too high for that, but there is a backdoor Roth that you can use to put money away. So I think that if you can kind of maximize that every year too, that would be very helpful. And I think if your wife can also do a Roth or a backdoor Roth through a spousal IRA, so I think that once again, you can now put $12,000 away every year for doing that. So I think that'd be very helpful to do.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's a great point, that you want to prioritize your retirement first before you start to try to maximize your kids' retirement. Your kids' education savings, because they can always get loans for that if necessary. The other thing is, when you are saving money in 529s and UTMAs, that is going to count against them in the FAFSA, so you might get less loans. So you do need to be aware of that. If you start saving a lot, those are assets under your kid's name, especially the UTMAs. They're counted pretty highly, so you want to keep that in mind, that you might be getting less loans.
Yeah, that's a good point. As we graduate from training, we have this big jump in salary and we're deciding how and where to spend our money. And, for me, it's kind of like figuring out, okay, how much should I squirrel away for retirement versus making sure that I have enough to pay my taxes, buying a home, and then I still have student loan debt. So at the same time, everybody's starting to talk about investing. So Seungtaek, what does it mean to set up a portfolio, and how would you recommend one get started?
Yeah, so I think this is a kind of a question that could be different from different people. I'll try to answer your first question, I think, in terms of how do you sort of allocate sort of your funds to different sort of needs or wants. I actually like what they call a 50-20-30 rule. So I think that 50 for sort of needs, or really what you have to pay. 20% for, I guess, or 30% for wants actually, and 20% for savings. So yeah, I think the thought is you cannot be on sort of saving mode all the time. You have to have some fun actually. So I think you do want to pay off your obviously expenses that you need to pay off for the 50%, 30% for having fun, and 20% will be for savings, and that could be kind of allocated to either paying off your loans or saving for, let's say, down payment on a house. I think technically, if you can do better than that, where you're saving more of that, I think that would definitely make your goals easier to achieve sooner. I think in terms of how to set up a portfolio, I think that once again depends on sort of your age. I usually tell the younger physicians that probably when you're younger, you can be more aggressive in terms of your portfolio allocation. So I think, in terms of how to sort of set up, I think you have to look at sort of different sort of securities. So I think that, as you're younger, I think I'll probably, invest more in stocks, which has a little bit of higher risk, but definitely potentially higher returns. And so I think in sort of when I sort of set my portfolio initially, it was around 80% stocks, and then about 15% bonds, and about 5% kind of pure cash, where I had sort of money saved away for possibly down payment for a house. As I'm getting older, I actually have decreased my stock allocation, so it's now about 60%, and then about 40% is now more bonds or sort of cash equivalents. So I think that you sort of want to kind of change the allocation over time as you get older to hopefully have safer securities. Unfortunately, last year, whether you had stocks or bonds, they all went down. So in the end, it's not a guarantee, but definitely that's what you want to sort of think. In terms of how to invest in stocks, I'm not a very good stock investor, I found out. I think that some people are very good, or I guess very lucky, which is probably just as good. But I'm not a very good stock investor. So I think my thought is that if you're going to invest in stocks, I would do with a sort of a index fund, either a mutual fund or ETF. I think right now ETFs are probably more tax efficient. At least some of them are. So I think that once again, whether you use Vanguard or Fidelity, Schwab, I think this is kind of great. They're all competing with each other to try to lower the fees as much as possible. So I think in the old days, especially with MD Anderson, we actually had a lot of different funds that were available, but they all had very high fees, 1% or more per year, where you had to pay in fees, which is kind of very high. Now, when you have these Vanguard or Fidelity index funds, some of them actually had zero fees. So I think that once again, that's really going to help save you in the long run. I remember watching, I think, Jack Bogle, who's the founder of Vanguard, tell us that really the fees will literally eat away at your returns. In fact, he would say that with a 40-year, sort of horizon, if you had 2% fees, you're paying 100% of the fees or 100% of the capital, 100% of the risk, but you're only getting like 33% of the actual return. And I think he was right. When you do the actual calculations in a interest calculator, that's what it'd be if you pay 2% in fees or more. So because of that, the lower the fee, the better it's going to be. So if you invest in stocks, please consider either an index mutual fund or index ETF.
Yeah, anything you want to add to that, Disha?
Yeah. So, that was great points about actually investing in your retirement account. You actually have to go, when you put this money in, you have to go in and choose what you're going to invest in. So all that information was, what do you do next once you put that money in your retirement account? And how do you most efficiently invest it to get the best gains? And I totally agree that most physicians don't have enough time to know all the stuff you need to know to invest in a particular stock. But if you invest in an ETF or an index fund, which is a bundle of stocks that's supposed to mimic a certain index, like an S&P 500 or a NASDAQ, then you're basically getting exposure to the entire economy in that one space. And that way you can grow as the economy grows. And yes, the economy has grown no matter what's happened in the United States, despite the Great Depression, despite the tech bubble, despite the real estate and lending bubble in 2008, all of that we made it through, and we have generally grown. And so there are risks in stock investing, but for that, you do get higher returns. When you're talking about asset allocation in a retirement account, you're talking about how much stocks versus how many bonds you need to have. Let's go backwards though and talk about why you want, where you want to put your money. You kind of alluded to the fact that a lot of young attendings have a lot of competing uses for their money, and there's been a lot of delayed gratification. You haven't had, much money to spend, and all of a sudden you come into a big check, right? And then what do you do with all that money? I know, but there's so many things to do. There are houses to buy. You're having kids. You need a lot of money you need to save for maternity leaves. You need to start saving for your retirement, because gosh, you're like 10 years behind your peers on that too, right? And you have student loans, a huge student debt burden. So how do you allocate your money? Well, first thing, the most important thing, I think, is to actually devise a budget, to know where your money is going. Devise a cash flow plan. And if you can do this before you grow into your attending paycheck, it's so valuable, because you know that now you can live on $50,000 to $60,000. You can do that. As you get an attending paycheck, you're also going to get the attending tax bill. So it's not going to be as big as you think it is, So when you have the written plan already of, okay, here's where my money was going as a trainee, then you can see exactly how much room you have to grow into your attending paycheck. The physician philosopher, Jimmy Turner, came up with the 10% growth idea, which I think are 10% reward for yourself. So anytime you come into extra money, take 10% to just enjoy it. I think that's a really valuable thing to do, because yes, you do have to live your life, and you can't, squirrel away all the rest of your life is short, and you never know when it's going to end. So take time to enjoy some of that. Then that's 10%. 10% of an attending paycheck is still, it's a very, very reasonable amount of money that you can have fun with, but you still have the rest of the paycheck to work with. So if you're going to prioritize anything, first of all, number one, if your employer has matching in your retirement account, at least contribute enough to get the employer match. So the employer is going to put an extra money into your account on top of your paycheck if you save for your own retirement. That's amazing. Why would you not take that, right? That's extra compensation that you're going to miss out on if you're not putting money into your retirement account. So definitely do that. I think if anyone, most trainees should be maxing out their retirement accounts, or, day one. At least their 401k or 403b. We have access to a lot of accounts, but at least that, the 22,500. If you can do that, you can still retire comfortably in your 50s or 60s. So you can still be shooting for an early retirement, because if you are maxing just that and investing it in a reasonable manner in a retirement account. So whether you do that or pay down your student loans is the next question. So for this, you really need to have a written financial plan. This is where a written financial plan for the next 5, 10, and 30 years really comes in handy, because it helps you sit down and prioritize all of your goals, because it's a very personal decision. So it's you and your household team, whether it's your spouse, partner, whoever helps you make decisions. But sit down and think about, okay, financially, or generally, where do I want to be in 5 years? Where do I want to be in 10 years? When do I want to retire? Which is a key question. If you want to be an early retiree, like many in the personal finance space, you need to be saving 40 to 50% of your income. But if you don't mind working until 65, then you have a lot more room in your, you can save less than that. And that's okay. You can save, 20%, and that's fine. If that's what you prefer to do, that's what your life plan is. When do I want to pay off my mortgage? What do I want to do with my student loans? There are many different options for student loans that I'm not going to go into now because it gets overwhelming. But the biggest thing is, do you work for a non-for-profit employer that might qualify you for PSLF, or do you want to go for the income-driven plans or income-driven repayment plans and try to pay it off in 20 to 25 years in a slow fashion, knowing that you're going to have a tax bomb at the end of it? Or do you want to just pay it off now? You don't want to have, you work for a for-profit employer and you're not eligible for name forgiveness. Then, do you want to pay it off now, or do you want to pay it off slowly? So these are the decisions that you and your family need to make together. And then once you have that end number, it's very easy to work backwards to see how much you need to save to achieve those goals.
Yeah, I like that. I like that idea of kind of sitting down with your household team and talking about what your long-term goals are, your short and long-term goals. My husband and I did that last year after we got married, and it was fun. I mean, you get snacks and you type out everything that you want, and you kind of realize if you're on the same page or not. And the little areas where you're not on the same page, you can try to figure out. So that's a great idea. So Disha, you've done so much amazing work with the Frugal Physician and the White Coat Investor, and I'm sure you've spoken to hundreds of physicians across the country. What are some of the most common mistakes that you see among physicians? Whether they're not, maybe they didn't plan for retirement enough, or anything that you've seen, or the most common things that you've seen, and where would you recommend our listeners? Where can they go to learn more about personal finance?
Absolutely. So yeah, the biggest mistakes I see, first, it's inaction, just analysis paralysis. We're so used to knowing everything, and we're so risk averse that a lot of us get stuck in analysis paralysis and don't actually take any action. And that's the worst, right? It's better. I want you to go out there, and if you lose money, okay, fine. Early in your career, you can make it up. But that's how you learn. Even if you make mistakes, if you don't take any action, you're going to lose. If you do take some action, most likely you're going to come out ahead. But even if you make mistakes and lose a little money, you're going to recover and continue to learn and get better, right? But the biggest mistake I see is just analysis paralysis. People that want to know everything about everything before they start investing, and you don't really need to. You need to understand the basics of investing, what a stock is, what a bond is, what an expense ratio is, how to read a fund prospectus, but you don't need to know each company's PE ratio and what their CEO is doing and what new product is coming on the market. You don't need to know all of that. So just getting started, starting putting money into retirement accounts, using index funds because they're easy and easy to learn. So if you can start doing that, that's the best thing you can do for yourself and your future and your family. As far as other mistakes I see people make, just getting overwhelmed, right? Getting overwhelmed with student loans, for example, and not taking action there. Not having a student loan plan and just kind of sticking their head in the sand and hoping it'll all work out. For student loans, it's very important that we know what our interest rates are. We need to know who our lender is. We need to know what all how much money we actually owe. And a lot of us, myself included, got in the habit of being a student and just not looking because it's so depressing, right? But it's important to know that. As you can see in this pandemic, there have been so many changes. There have been so many beneficial things that have happened automatically, but there are also things that people have been able to take advantage of because they knew the rules, because they were paying attention. For one of them was the temporary PSLF waiver, where you could make FFEL loans eligible for PSLF, which was not the case prior to the pandemic. And you had to apply for consolidation before October 31st. And I've heard from several people that have been able to get their loans forgiven because they acted on that within the time frame and got all their debt wiped out, right? Just hundreds and thousands of dollars. It's amazing what can happen if you're paying attention. And, the government, by and large, is actually trying to help you. They're trying to keep you afloat, the economy afloat. And especially in an emergency situation like a pandemic, they've been putting out all kinds of measures to try to help people. And it's our responsibility to pay attention and take advantage of that and let them help us. So where can you go to learn about stuff like that? Okay, so first of all, for investing and really anything else, whitecoatinvestor.com. We are the place for this kind of information for high net worth individuals. We're going to have the latest information that you need. We have so many contributors. We have so many experts that come on our site and podcast daily. They're going to be giving you all the information that you need. And honestly, you're not going to get that information from CNBC and NBC because it's not aimed at you. It's aimed at the general public. So whitecoatinvestor.com, and of course, thefrugalphysician.com. The Frugal Physician is my site, and I partner with the White Coat Investor. And we're both, the Frugal Physician is where you can find ways to save money and save more money so you can invest it. And so those are great places. Other places, studentloanadvice.com has a lot of information on student loans and what's going on with that and what you need to be paying attention to. So I would recommend all of those places to go and learn and get good information. Of course, just the IRS site, like IRS actually has, IRS and studentloans.gov have a lot of good information out there. So you should peruse that. It's okay. It's totally readable.
Seungtaek, do you have any additional comments about the most common financial mistakes?
Yeah, I was gonna say probably the most common mistake I see is, you get out of residency, you get that first paycheck and you blow it on something like a car. So I think what I tell my residents who are about to graduate is that if you can live like a resident for the first couple of years, maybe, up to 5, and delay the gratification a little bit longer, you can really save up a lot of money for paying off loans or paying down a mortgage or a down payment or, sort of fund your retirement. So like I say, if you can just delay the gratification just a little bit, I think that's going to really set them much forward in terms of, the rest of their retirement. I think, in terms of, I guess something else I see is also trying to time the market. As I said, I think a lot of us are not the best stock investors just because, we're obviously very good at medicine, but in stocks, we're not so good. And so like, for instance, now I think I hear a lot of, oh, the market is down, I shouldn't be investing right now. But I'm like, this is a perfect time to investing, to put money into the market, because in the end, when it goes up, that's when you get all the gains. So I think in the end, I really ask them if they can to do dollar cost averaging, always put some money in every month. I mean, in fact, I think most of my gains in my career in terms of my retirement account, I think has been from the fact that I was kept on putting money in, even when the market was down. So once again, steady investing, I think that's really going to be key in the future.
Oh my God, how do I miss live like a resident?
Yeah, exactly.
I
right.
love that.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. So that's huge, right? If you can continue to just live that middle-class lifestyle that you were living in residency and get the attending paycheck, you are going to win. You're going to have so much cash to invest and put to work and all of these goals, all of these things that you need to do as an early attending. So look at it as an opportunity, because first of all, you already have the house, you already have the lifestyle. You need to change nothing. It's actually pretty easy if you do it right out of training. Just change nothing and just take the extra money. Do not listen to everyone else who tells you you need to live a certain way to be an attending. Don't listen to the people that are telling you you're depriving yourself. Well, you aren't really depriving yourself as a resident. It's not a bad life. I mean, other than working your butt off, which you were, but but other than that, I mean, lifestyle wise, it's not a terrible lifestyle. You're not living in a third world. You're, comfortable, have a house, a roof over your head, food on the table, and generally you're taking a few vacations as well. And as long as you continue to do that and not, upgrade every single thing, you're going to have plenty of room. And I love that. Live like a resident should be, if you can do that for 3 to 5 years, really come out ahead.
I agree. I completely agree. We have a final question for Seungtaek. Any advice or special considerations you have for early career radiation oncologists?
Yeah, I guess it's really for any early physician, I think. I always kind of tell so once again, residents for graduating, probably rent first. I think their, sort of initial desire is to buy a house, obviously. But I should say to early physicians that you may be moving or changing jobs pretty quickly, so don't sort of settle down right away. Rent initially, that'll also give you some more information about sort of the real estate market in the city that we're working in. So once again, they'll sort of be able to sort of find and buy a house, it's part of the time that they're interested in the most. As I said before, live like a resident initially, to sort of spare or save up some money. I think for radiation colleges in general, in more specifically, I think it depends a little bit on the practice you'll be going to. Some practices you are going to become a partner, and you have to buy in terms of the partnership. So for that, you probably do have to maybe live like a resident for the first couple of years to save up that sort of that payment for buying in the practice. I think that's the case, and yeah, please do that. But otherwise, I think that pretty much for any radiation college sort of early attending, I think it's gonna be very similar to almost any attending in any other specialty. So once again, live like a resident. I think I really love the idea of having a meeting with your spouse in terms of financial planning. I try to do that with my wife usually once a year. I noticed that when I talk to people, like usually it's the one partner is very interested and the other part is not so interested. So you may need to kind of like lure them with snacks or like in terms of like get to this meeting. But if you can, I think it really helps out in the long run, because once again, it's great to be on the same page in terms of financial planning.
Yeah, I totally agree. I had to we did our like dream date. I call it the money dream date, where you get to sit and think about how rich do I want to be. It's a wonderful talk. And really you get to sit down and like really hear what your partner's dreams are, which is amazing. But I did this in Hawaii because there's a CME conference there. So took my husband there, sat on the balcony, and we did our money dream date. It's a fabulous activity. You really should do it, because you get so much insight into your partner's way of thinking that you really don't get otherwise in everyday life. And most divorces are 50% of divorces are because of money, because we don't realize what our partner's shooting for. I realized my dreams, like what I want, is a lot like more extravagant than what my husband wants. He just wants security and and stability and time to play video games and Dungeons and Dragons. Which is okay, that's what he wants. And I'm like, I want to early retire, then travel the world, blah blah blah. But these are the things that we learn about each other that we may not fully recognize in our everyday life. So very important to get on the same financial page, and then keep that book open. Keep talking about money. My husband and I meet once a month for our money budget date, where we go through all of our spending, put it in our spreadsheet, because we're both very like spreadsheet minded people. And really track what we're spending and then how we're investing, and that helps us keep on track as far as our goals go, and also our viewpoints on things. If I'm spending too much money, that's usually the case. I'm spending too much money. I can pull it back and realize that we need to do better next. I need to do better next month, that kind of thing. And he does the same. If he spends too much on certain things. So important to stay on the same space and you're in the page with your spouse, so that where you're going as a team.
I have to complain. I'm still in one of the exercises by Jimmy Turner. It's called the White Dinner. And we have scheduled that with my wife for so long. We always find a reason not to do it, and we have been postponing it. So after today, I promise we're going to try to do it in our next vacation next week.
Yay! Yeah, I love that.
Well, thank you so much today, Dr. Seungtaek Choi and Dr. Disha Spath, for your time, your valuable insights and expertise. We really appreciate you being with us today.
My pleasure.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks to our listeners for your time today. If you are enjoying the content of the ACRO podcast, please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you go to your podcast. You can also view the podcast on ACRO's YouTube channel. Have a great day.